The smell hit me first. Not cordite, not diesel. It was the smell of fresh shit. Tommy Rizzo had lost his bowels when the first shell landed, and now we were both crammed into a foxhole barely wide enough for one man, and the stink was so thick I could taste it. He kept whispering, "I don't want to die here," over and over like a broken phonograph, and I wanted to tell him to shut up, but my teeth were clamped so tight I thought they might crack. The ground was shaking, not trembling, shaking, like the earth itself was trying to throw us off. I could hear them coming. 56 tons of German steel moving at walking speed down a sunken road that was the only path through this section of bocage. Each track link hit stone with a sound like a hammer on an anvil. Clank, clank, clank. The rhythm was hypnotic, patient, the sound of something that knows it cannot be stopped. 4 Tiger tanks. The lieutenant had told us that morning. His voice tried to stay calm, but his hands were shaking when he lit his cigarette. 4 Tigers. Hold until relieved. Nobody asked what relieved meant. My hands were wrapped around a coil of field telephone wire, 300 feet of braided steel cable. I was gripping it so hard my knuckles were white. It was not supposed to be there. I was supposed to be holding my rifle. But 3 weeks ago, I had climbed onto an abandoned tiger in a field outside a village whose name I never learned, and I had seen something. A stone, fist-sized, jammed between 2 overlapping road wheels so tight the rubber had split like torn skin. That stone was smaller than my hand. The tank weighed 56 tons. The stone had won. The first 88mm shell tore the air apart. That is the only way to describe the sound. Not a boom. A crack. Like reality itself splitting open. The farmhouse 200 yards to our left did not explode. It disintegrated. One moment, it was a building. The next, it was a cloud of stone and timber and dust moving outward at supersonic speed. The shockwave hit me in the chest and I tasted blood. I had bitten through my tongue without knowing it. Warm copper flooded my mouth. I spat and it came out red and thick. Rizzo was crying, not sobbing, just tears cutting clean lines through the dirt on his face. He was 19 years old. I was 23. I felt ancient. Another shell hit. Closer. The hedge above us exploded, and branches and leaves and clods of earth rained down into the hole. Something sharp hit my helmet with a clang that made my ears ring. I pressed my face into the dirt. The dirt smelled like rot and old roots and something sweet that I did not want to think about. Someone had died in this field before we got here. Down the line, I heard retching. Someone was vomiting. Someone else was praying in Spanish. "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." The words ran together into a single desperate stream of sound. I wanted to pray too, but I had stopped believing in God somewhere between Omaha Beach and this hole in the ground. If God was watching, he was not interested in intervening. The Tigers were maybe 100 yards away now. I could hear individual components, the squeal of drive sprockets, the metallic whine of turret motors, the higher-pitched rattle of spare track links chained to the hull. Then I heard voices, German, shouting commands. I did not understand the words, but I understood the tone. Confident, unhurried. They knew what was coming. We were infantry in a hedgerow, and they were 56 tons of armor with 88mm guns, and they had done this 1,000 times before in Russia and Poland and France. They knew how it ended. I looked at the 2 bazooka teams 15 yards to my left. They were our anti-tank defense. On paper, the M1 bazooka could penetrate 3 inches of armor at 100 yards. On paper. The Tiger's frontal armor was over 4 inches of hardened angled steel. Even a perfect hit at point-blank range would bounce off. The only way to kill a Tiger was to let it roll past you, then stand up behind it and shoot at the engine deck while the turret swung around to blow you apart. The bazooka teams knew this. I could see it in their faces. They were already dead. They just did not know the exact moment yet. Rizzo grabbed my arm. His fingernails dug into my skin through my jacket. His eyes were huge and white. "Where are you going?" I looked down. I was standing. I did not remember standing. The wire was in my hands. I did not remember deciding. My body had made the choice before my brain caught up. I climbed out of the foxhole. The lane was a shallow cut in the earth with banks 4 feet high on either side. I stayed low and ran. My boots slipped on wet ground. Mud sucked at my heels. The sound of the tigers was a physical thing now pressing against my eardrums. I could feel it in my chest, in my throat, in my teeth. Another shell screamed overhead and hit something behind me, and the blast wave shoved me forward like a giant hand. I stumbled, but did not fall. 30 yards ahead were 2 fence posts, weathered gray oak driven deep into the earth, remains of a gate that did not exist anymore. I reached the left post and dropped to my knees. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the wire. I unwound the coil, wrapped the end around the post, once, twice, 3 times. My father had taught me this knot in a basement in Pittsburgh when I was 12 years old. He was securing electrical conduit. He said this knot grips harder the more you pull on it. I tied it now with fingers that felt like they belonged to someone else. I stood in the center of the road. The tiger was right there, maybe 40 yards away. I could see it through the curve. The hull, the long gun, the commander standing in the open hatch with binoculars. I froze. For one terrible second, I could not move, could not breathe, could not think. Then training took over. I dragged the wire across the lane, kept it taut, 8 inches off the ground. My hands were slick with sweat and mud and blood from where I had scraped them on the post. The wire left a thin, dark line through the dust. I reached the right post, wrapped it. 3 loops, same knot. Pulled until my shoulders burned. The cable sang when I plucked it, almost invisible in the shadow. The tiger was 20 yards away. I could see details now. Rust on the track guards, mud caked on the road wheels, a number painted on the turret, 131. The commander's face was visible under his cap. He was maybe 30 years old. He looked tired. I turned and ran. My legs felt weak, disconnected. The hedge on my right exploded as another shell hit, and I was flying, not jumping, flying. The blast picked me up and threw me sideways into the earthen bank. I hit hard. All the air left my lungs. I could not breathe, could not see. My ears were roaring. I clawed at the ground and dragged myself into the foxhole and landed on top of Rizzo, and we were tangled together in the bottom of the hole like animals. The tiger came around the curve. I had seen tigers before. I had seen the one in the field, but this was different. This was alive. The hull filled the entire road. The gun was so long it seemed to stretch forever. The tracks wrapped around the drive sprockets with that terrible patient rhythm. The whole machine was black with mud and scarred with impact marks where shells had hit and bounced away. The turret turned. The gun elevated. The coaxial machine gun tracked left, sweeping the hedgerow. The commander was still standing in the hatch, still scanning, still looking for targets. He did not see the wire. 15 yards. 10. 5. I pressed myself into the dirt so hard I thought I might push through to the other side of the earth. Rizzo was not whispering anymore. He was silent. Maybe he had stopped breathing. Maybe I had. The sound of the tiger filled the universe. Nothing else existed, just that sound. The left drive sprocket hit the wire. Nothing happened. For 1 heartbeat. 2. Then the wire caught on the bottom edge of the 3rd road wheel. The forward momentum pulled it upward, inward. It wrapped around the wheel. Fast. Faster than I expected. 1 loop. 2. 3. The interleaved wheels that made the tiger so stable now became a trap. The wire fed itself into the mechanism, jamming between the 2nd and 3rd wheels. The left track locked. The right track kept moving. The tiger pivoted. Hard, violent. The whole machine slewed sideways, throwing up dirt and stones. I saw the driver react, saw his hands jerk on the controls. He gunned the engine. Wrong choice. The Maybach roared. 700 horsepower tried to drag the locked track forward. The right track bit into the road, and the tiger spun 15 degrees, and something inside the running gear snapped with a sound like a rifle shot. The engine screamed. Black smoke poured from the exhaust. Then silence. The driver killed it. The tiger sat motionless, canted at an angle, blocking the road. The commander stood in his hatch. He looked back, looked forward. His mouth was open. He was shouting into his radio. I could not hear the words, but I could see his face. He was terrified. For 5 seconds, the world was silent. No engines, no gunfire, just wind in the hedges. Then the lieutenant was on the radio, voice high and fast. Fire mission. Coordinates. Adjust fire. I heard the distant thump of artillery. Then whistling. Then the sky fell. The shells were set for airburst. They exploded 20 feet above the hedgerow, spraying steel fragments downward in a cone of death. The German infantry supporting the tanks were caught in the open. I heard screaming, not words, just sounds, raw animal sounds that I still hear in my sleep 70 years later. White phosphorus ignited and thick white smoke rolled across everything. It smelled like burning chemicals and burning meat. Rizzo was staring at me. His eyes were huge. His mouth was working, but no sound came out. Then he grabbed my jacket and pulled me close and screamed in my face. "What did you do? What the fuck did you do?" I did not answer. I could not. My whole body was shaking. My teeth were chattering. I pressed my forehead against the dirt and tried to breathe, but I could not get enough air. My chest was tight. My vision was narrowing. I thought I was dying. I was not dying. I was having a panic attack, but I did not know that word then. The bombardment lasted 10 minutes. It felt like hours. When it stopped, the hedgerow was on fire. Bodies were scattered across the road. Some were moving. Most were not. The 3 Tigers behind the disabled lead tank were trying to reverse, but the lane was too narrow. They could not turn, could not maneuver. They were trapped. 4 hours later, American Sherman tanks arrived. They bypassed the disabled Tiger using gaps in the bocage. They reached positions behind the German column. At 6:50, they opened fire on the rearmost Tiger. 3 76mm armor-piercing shells punched through the engine deck. The Tiger erupted. Flames shot 50 feet into the air. 2 crewmen crawled out of the hatches. They were on fire, burning like torches. They rolled in the dirt screaming. One of them stopped moving. The other kept screaming until someone shot him. The remaining Tigers surrendered, white flags tied to radio antennas. Crews climbed out with hands raised. They looked young, younger than I expected. Their faces were black with soot. Their eyes were wide. They kept looking at the disabled lead tank, at the wire still wrapped around the wheels, at me standing beside the lieutenant. One of them said something in German. I did not understand. Later, someone told me he said, "What kind of weapon is that?" It was not a weapon. It was 300 feet of field telephone wire, 8 ounces, rated for 200 pounds tensile strength. It cost maybe $3. It stopped 56 tons of German armor because it caught in exactly the right place at exactly the right time. That is all. Nothing more. No genius. No heroism. Just luck and desperation. And 90 seconds before the monsters arrived, they gave me a medal 3 months later. Bronze Star. I stood at attention in a muddy field outside Aachen while a colonel read a citation. Innovative action resulting in neutralization of enemy armor. They shook my hand. Took a photograph. I went back to my unit. Rizzo never spoke to me again. Not because he was angry, because every time he looked at me, he remembered the smell in that foxhole, and the sound of the Tiger, and the moment he thought he was going to die. I reminded him of his fear, so he avoided me. I understood. After the war, I went home to Pittsburgh. I used the GI Bill, finished an engineering degree, got married, had kids, worked as an electrician for 31 years, union job, steady pay. My wife died in 2003. My children are old now, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. I am 93 years old. Most of the men I served with are dead. Rizzo died in 2006, heart attack. I went to his funeral, did not stay long. People ask me sometimes what the war was like. They want stories. They want heroes. I tell them there were no heroes, just scared men trying not to die. I tell them I was not brave. I was terrified. I did not stop 4 Tigers because I was clever. I stopped them because doing nothing meant dying, and I did not want to die that morning. The wire was in my hands. The posts were there. I had 90 seconds, that is all, but I still hear the sound. Every night, the clank of tracks on stone, the rhythm that never stops. I wake up sometimes, and I am back in that foxhole with Rizzo crying beside me, and the ground shaking, and the smell of shit and cordite and burning meat. I am 23 years old again. I am running toward the posts with a coil of wire in my hands and a Tiger tank 40 yards away, and my whole body screaming at me to turn around. But I do not turn around. I never turn around, because in that moment I made a choice, and that choice is who I am. The wire held. The Tiger stopped. 32 men lived. That is the story. That is all of it. 300 feet of cable, 8 ounces, $3, 90 seconds. The difference between living and dying is often that simple, and that random. I have spent 70 years trying to understand why I survived, and so many others did not. I still do not have an answer. Maybe there is no answer. Maybe it was just luck. Bad for them. Good for me. Maybe that is all war ever is. But the sound never stops. Clank, clank, clank. I will hear it until the day I die. The tiger burned for 3 days. I watched it from a foxhole 200 yards away while we waited for orders to move forward. The smoke was black and thick, and it smelled like burning rubber and chemicals and something sweet that made me gag. On the second day, the wind shifted and the smell got worse. Metal does not burn like that. Flesh burns like that. Someone said there were still crew inside. Someone else said to shut the hell up. By the third day, the fire had burned itself out. The hull was scorched black. The paint had bubbled and peeled away. The rubber on the road wheels had melted into lumps. The turret was frozen at an angle pointing toward nothing. Engineers came in with cutting torches. They worked for 6 hours trying to remove the wire from the running gear. It had melted into the rubber and scored the steel underneath. When they finally cut it free, one of them held it up. It was twisted and blackened but intact. He looked at me. This is what stopped it. I nodded. He shook his head. Jesus Christ. They towed the tiger away on a flatbed truck. The wire went into a bag. I never saw either of them again, but I saw other things. Things I wish I could unsee. Things that come back at night when I close my eyes. The morning after the tiger surrendered, we moved forward through the lane. The bocage was burning. White phosphorus does not go out easily. It sticks to whatever it touches and burns through skin and bone. The German infantry who had been supporting the tanks were scattered along the road. Most were dead. Some were not. One man was sitting against the hedgerow with his hands pressed against his stomach. His intestines were spilling out between his fingers. He was crying, not screaming, just crying. Softly, like a child. He looked at me as I walked past. His eyes were blue. I remember that. Very blue. He said something in German. I did not understand. I kept walking. 50 yards further down the road was another body. This one had no head, just a neck that ended in torn meat and white bone. His hands were still gripping his rifle. His finger was still on the trigger. I wondered what he had been aiming at when the shell hit him. I wondered if he saw it coming. I wondered if there was a moment between seeing it and dying when he knew. I still wonder. The 3 tigers that had surrendered were parked in a field under guard. Their crews were sitting on the ground with their hands on their heads. 17 men. Most were young, maybe 20 years old. One was older, maybe 40. His uniform was cleaner than the others. An officer. He was staring at the disabled lead tiger still canted sideways in the road. He kept shaking his head. I walked over to him. He looked up. His face was gray. He said something in German. One of our guards spoke a little German. He translated. He wants to know what weapon you used. I showed him the piece of wire the engineers had cut away. 8 ounces of cable, blackened and twisted. The German officer stared at it. Then he started laughing. Not happy laughing. The kind of laughing that means something inside you has broken. He laughed until he cried. Then he put his face in his hands. We moved on. The bocage swallowed us again. Hedgerows and sunken lanes and fields that all looked the same. 2 days later, we were in another fight. This time it was infantry and mortars. No tanks. Rizzo was hit. Shrapnel in the chest and arm. Not fatal, but bad enough. They carried him back to an aid station. Before they took him away, he grabbed my jacket and pulled me close. His breath smelled like blood and vomit. He said, "Stay away from me." I said, "What?" He said, "I don't want you near me. You are bad luck. Everywhere you go, people die." I pulled back. He let go. They carried him away. I never saw him again. Maybe he was right. People did die around me. A lot of people. I kept account for a while. Then I stopped because the number got too big. In 3 months between June and September 1944, my company lost 62 men killed and over 100 wounded. I knew most of their names. I knew where they were from. I knew who had girlfriends and who had wives and who had kids. After a while, I stopped learning names. It hurt less when they died if you did not know their names. The wire trick worked 4 more times, once near St. Lo, once outside Caen. Twice in the Ardennes during the winter offensive, each time the same thing. Find a narrow road, string the wire, wait Watch the tank jam and stop. Call in artillery or air support. Watch the crew surrender or burn. It became routine, almost boring, except for the part where people died. The last time was different. December 1944. The Germans had launched a massive counterattack through the Ardennes forest. We were dug in along a road junction holding back a column of panthers and tigers. I strung the wire. A panther hit it. The tank stopped, but this time the crew did not surrender. They stayed inside and kept firing. Their turret could still traverse. Their guns still worked. They killed 3 men in the first minute. The lieutenant called in artillery, but the Germans had positioned smoke generators. The gunners could not see the target. We were pinned down. I grabbed a satchel charge, 12 pounds of composition B explosive with a 5-second fuse. I told the lieutenant I was going after the panther. He said no. I said it was my wire, my trap, my responsibility. He said that is the stupidest reason I have ever heard to get yourself killed. I said probably. I went anyway. The smoke was so thick I could barely see. I crawled forward on my belly, 50 yards. The ground was frozen. My hands went numb. The panther was firing. Each shot was so loud it felt like being punched. I could see the muzzle flash through the smoke, orange and bright. I crawled closer, 30 yards, 20, 10. I was underneath the tank. The engine was running. The exhaust was choking. I could hear the crew talking inside. German. Fast. Urgent. I armed the satchel charge, wedged it between the track and the hull, pulled the fuse, started counting. 1, 2, 3. I ran. Not toward our lines. Away from them. Perpendicular. The Panther turret was already turning toward where I had come from. 4, 5. The explosion picked me up and threw me into a ditch. I hit hard. My head bounced off frozen dirt. Everything went white, then black, then white again. I could not hear, could not see, could not breathe. I thought I was dead. Then I was not. When I crawled out of the ditch, the Panther was burning. The satchel charge had blown the track off and ruptured something in the fuel system. Flames were pouring from the engine compartment. The crew was trying to get out. The commander's hatch opened. A man climbed halfway out. Then he stopped. He was on fire. His uniform, his hair, his face. He screamed. It was the worst sound I have ever heard. Worse than artillery. Worse than anything. He screamed, and then he stopped screaming and slumped over the hatch. Still burning. I vomited. Right there in the snow. I vomited until there was nothing left. Then I dry heaved, my whole body shaking. Someone grabbed my shoulder. It was the lieutenant. He said, "We need to move." I said, "I can't." He said, "Yes, you can." He pulled me to my feet. We moved. That night, we were pulled off the line. Battalion headquarters. They said we had done good work. They said the wire tactic was being distributed to other units. They said I was being put in for another medal. I said I did not want another medal. They said too bad. 3 weeks later, I stood at attention in a muddy field outside Bastogne while a colonel pinned a silver star to my jacket. He shook my hand. He said the entire army was grateful for my innovation. I said thank you. I was lying. Innovation. That is what they called it. Like I had invented something. Like it was clever. It was not clever. It was desperation. It was a man with wire in his hands and 90 seconds before he died. That is all it ever was. But they wrote it up in field manuals. They taught it at engineering schools. They called it an improvised anti-tank technique. They never mentioned the smell. They never mentioned the screaming. They never mentioned the German officer who laughed until he cried. They never mentioned any of that. By March 1945, we were across the Rhine. By April, we were in Germany proper. The bocage was behind us. The hedgerows were gone. Now it was open country and towns and cities. The fighting got worse. The Germans were defending their homeland now. Every house was a fortress. Every street was a kill zone. We lost men every day. Not in big battles, just ones and twos. Sniper fire, booby traps, mortars. The kind of dying that does not make it into history books. We found the first camp in early April. I do not remember the name. Maybe I never knew it. It was just a camp. Barbed wire, guard towers, barracks. We thought it was a prisoner of war camp. Then we got closer. The smell hit us first, like the tiger that burned for 3 days, but worse. Much worse. Rotten meat and chemicals and human waste. The gates were open. The guards were gone. Inside were bodies, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, stacked like wood, lying in piles, scattered in the mud. Some were naked, some wore striped uniforms. All were skeletal, bones wrapped in skin, empty eye sockets, mouths open, teeth yellow. Some were not dead yet. They moved, slowly, like puppets with cut strings. They looked at us, but did not speak, did not react, just looked. Their eyes were empty, not angry, not sad, just empty. One man reached out his hand toward me. I stepped back. I am not proud of that. I stepped back. Someone else gave him water. He drank. Then he died. Just like that. Drank the water and died. We found the ovens, industrial furnaces, built to burn bodies. The ashes were piled nearby, gray and white with fragments of bone, human bone, jaw bones, skulls, femurs, just scattered in piles like garbage. A sergeant walked up to me. He was crying, not sobbing, just tears running down his face. He said, "What the fuck is this?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "We are supposed to be fighting soldiers." I said, "I know." He said, "These are not soldiers." I said, "I know." He walked away. That night, I sat in a barn with my back against the wall. I had not eaten, could not eat. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the bodies, the piles of bones, the empty eyes, the man who reached out his hand. Rizzo was right. Everywhere I went, people died. Not because of the war, because of something worse, something that did not have a name, something that made the war seem almost clean. The lieutenant came in. He sat down next to me. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said, "They are saying there are more camps, dozens of them, maybe hundreds." I said, "Jesus Christ." He said, "Yeah." We sat in silence. Finally, he said, "You did good work with that wire. You saved a lot of lives." I said, "Did I?" He looked at me. He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I stopped some tanks. I killed some Germans. I saved some Americans. But what about them? What about the people in the camp? Where was the wire that could have stopped that? Where was the clever trick that could have saved them?" He did not answer. There was no answer. We sat there until morning. Neither of us slept. The war ended in May. Everyone was celebrating. Men were drinking and singing and firing their weapons in the air. I sat in a foxhole and did not move. Someone asked if I was okay. I said yes. I was lying. I was not okay. I have never been okay since. They sent me home in July. The ship took 2 weeks. I stood on the deck and watched the ocean, gray water stretching to the horizon. I thought about jumping, just stepping over the rail and falling into the water, letting it take me. I did not jump. I do not know why. Maybe because I was a coward. Maybe because I thought I owed it to the men who did not make it home to at least try to live. Maybe because I was just too tired to move. When I got back to Pittsburgh, my mother cried. My father shook my hand. They asked if I was hungry. I said yes. They made dinner, pot roast and potatoes. My favorite. I took one bite and ran to the bathroom and vomited. The smell reminded me of the camp. Everything reminded me of the camp. I could not eat meat for 2 years. I got a job, factory work, then electrical work. I went to school on the GI Bill. I met a woman. We got married, had kids. I never told her about the war. Not really. She knew I had been there. She knew I had medals. She did not know about the wire. She did not know about the burning panther. She did not know about the camp. I never told anyone about the camp. The nightmares started in 1947. Always the same dream. I am back in the bocage. The tiger is coming. I string the wire. The tank hits it. Jams. Stops. But when the crew climbs out, they are not Germans. They are the people from the camp. Skeletal, empty eyes, striped uniforms. They look at me. They reach out their hands. I step back. They keep reaching. I wake up screaming. My wife asked what the dreams were about. I said I did not remember. She knew I was lying. She stopped asking. We had a good marriage. Not perfect. Good. She died in 2003. Cancer. I held her hand while she went. It was peaceful. Not like the war. Not like the camp. Just peaceful. I was grateful for that. People still ask me about The Wire. History professors, documentary makers, journalists. They want to know how I thought of it. They want to know if I was scared. They want to know what it felt like to stop a tiger tank. I tell them I do not remember. They do not believe me. They think I am being modest. I am not being modest. I am being honest. The Wire is not what I remember. The Wire is not what matters. What I remember is the smell, burning rubber and flesh, the German officer laughing until he cried, Rizzo saying, "Stay away from me." The man in the camp reaching out his hand, the bodies stacked like wood, the bones and the ashes. These are the things that stayed. These are the things that will not leave. I am 93 years old. My children are old. My grandchildren have children. I have outlived almost everyone I knew. Sometimes I wonder why. Why did I survive when so many others did not? What made me different? What made me special? The answer is nothing. I was not different. I was not special. I was just lucky. Bad luck for someone else. Good luck for me. That is all war ever is. Just luck. Random and terrible and meaningless. But the sound never stops. Clank, clank, clank. The tracks on stone. The rhythm that never ends. And under that sound is another sound. Quieter. The sound of a man reaching out his hand in a camp I cannot name. The sound of empty eyes watching me step back. The sound of ovens built to burn human beings. That sound is louder than the tanks. That sound is what I hear when everything else goes quiet. That sound is what I will hear until I die. And maybe that is appropriate, because stopping a tank does not matter if you cannot stop the other thing. The thing that built the camps. The thing that stacked the bodies. The thing that turned human beings into ashes. I stopped 4 tigers with a piece of wire. I saved maybe 100 American lives, but I did not stop that. Nobody stopped that. Not in time. Not when it mattered. And that is what I carry. Not the medal, not the glory. The knowledge that clever tricks and desperate measures mean nothing against that kind of evil. Nothing at all. The wire held, the tank stopped, and people died anyway. That is the story. That is all of it. The Infantry Museum keeps the lights a little too bright in that hall. Everything under glass looks cleaner than it has any right to be. Medals, flags, bent rifle barrels, photos of boys trying to look like men. And at the end of one row, in a narrow case between a rusted German helmet and a deactivated bazooka, there is 8 inches of blackened wire, field telephone cable, World War II, used by Corporal James Mallister, 1st Infantry Division, to immobilize a German Tiger tank. Normandy, June 1944. Donated 1987. That is what the little card says. Neat black letters on white. No mention of the smell. No mention of the screaming. No mention of the part where I nearly pissed myself in a hedgerow, listening to 56 tons of steel come for me. Just the facts. People like facts. They are cleaner than truth. A young couple drifts past, talking in low voices. The man reads the card out loud, once, like he is practicing for a quiz. He huffs a little laugh. That little piece of wire stopped a tank, he says. His girlfriend glances over. How? He shrugs. Ingenious Americans, I guess. They move on to the next display, a mannequin in a faded parachute harness. The wire and I are alone again. I donated that piece in 1987. It is not the original, if that word even means anything here. The first wire was cut off a road wheel by a grimy engineer with a cutting torch, dropped into a canvas bag, and disappeared into the great military stomach that swallows things and does not burp. This length came from another day and another road in another patch of hedgerow, when the trick had stopped being a miracle and started being procedure. It sat in a cardboard box in my basement for 4 decades, under a stack of old Union newsletters and a broken toaster. I do not know why I kept it. Souvenir maybe. Evidence maybe. A reminder. Then some historian from the Army called my house and used words like innovation and decisive and doctrine, and I found myself wrapping the wire in newspaper and sending it south with a polite cover letter I did not mean. Now it sits here, under lights. Behind glass. Important. Sir? A voice says behind me. I turn, slow. When you are 93, everything is slow. The young man standing there has the kind of posture you do not see in civilians. Shoulders square, feet braced, eyes always moving, always measuring. His uniform fits a little too well. No wrinkles, no slack. An infantry badge glints over his pocket. Were you in the war? He asks. There is only one war in this building, but I do not correct him. Yes, I say. A long time ago. He nods, like this confirms a suspicion. Europe, Normandy, France, Germany. I pause. Some places in between. His gaze drifts back to the case. My great-granddad was over there, never talked about it. He hesitates. We learned about this in training. The wire trick, I mean. They told us a corporal jammed a tiger with phone cable. I did not realize that was your name on the card. I look at my name. It is spelled right. That is something. They made it sound, he says, like a legend. Brave corporal stands up to unbeatable tank. You know, hero stuff. Hero stuff. I swallow. My tongue still remembers the taste of blood from the day I bit through it in that Normandy hole. It was not really like that, I say. He waits. This is the part where, in his head, the story is supposed to start. The clean version with a beginning, a middle, and an end you can clap for. I could give him that. I have learned how, over the years, people like it. It fits in their heads alongside baseball scores and movie plots. Instead, I just look at the wire. You ever been scared? I ask. He huffs a short laugh. Yes, sir. I do not mean nervous, I say. I mean so scared you cannot feel your fingers. So scared you cannot tell if you are going to shit yourself or pass out first. So scared you can hear your own heartbeat louder than the shells. His smile falters. Yes, sir, he says again, quieter. It was like that, I say. 4 tigers on one road and 32 of us in holes with 2 rocket launchers that might as well have been slingshots. I did not stand up because I was brave. I stood up because there was wire in my hands, posts in front of me, and nothing else between us and being run over. He looks back at the wire. 8 inches of black. They said it saved a lot of lives, he says. It did, I say. American lives, German lives too, if you want to get technical. A jammed tank that surrenders beats one that fights to the last man. He nods. So, you are a hero. There it is. The word that lands like a stone in my gut every time someone says it. I was a corporal with a bad sense of self-preservation, I say. Hero is a big word. It belongs to other people. Like who? He says. I think of Rizzo, 19 years old and shaking beside me in the foxhole, then telling me to stay away because everywhere I went, somebody died. I think of the medics crawling out under fire to tape men back together long enough to get them on a stretcher. I think of the prisoner in the camp who still had enough left in him to hold out a canteen to a stranger when he could barely stand. The ones who did what needed doing when there was no chance of walking away afterward, I say. I always seem to find ways to walk away. He shifts his weight, frowns slightly. Do you regret it? He asks. What you did? The question surprises me. Most people ask if I am proud, as if those are the only 2 settings. Every day, I say. He blinks. Because of the men you killed. Because I got to come home, I say. Because I got out, and a lot of better men did not. Because I have had 70 years to sit in a chair and listen to my own heartbeat, while the faces of people who never made it home line up in my head, waiting for an explanation I do not have. He watches me in silence. Museum noise hums in the background. A group of school children laughs 2 halls away. Someone coughs. Someone drops a brochure. Was it worth it? He says finally. He means the war. All of it. Not just the wire and the tigers and the hedgerows, but the camps and the cities and the numbers no one can really hold in their mind. We stopped something that needed stopping, I say. That much I know. There are things a man sees once in his life and thinks, if we had not fought, this would be everywhere. So yes, it had to be done. I let the next words take their time. But worth it, I say. That is a different question. You put tens of millions of lives on one side of a scale, and we won't on the other, and I do not know how you measure that. I am an electrician kid, not a philosopher. He gives a small, crooked smile at that. I am not a kid, he says automatically, then seems to hear himself and lets the objection die. You will be, I say, when you are my age. He looks at the wire one more time. I deploy again in a few months, he says. Different war, different desert, different reasons. But sometimes I wonder if, 70 years from now, someone will be standing in a museum looking at something I did and telling themselves a story about it that has nothing to do with how it felt. He laughs once without humor. If I make it to your age, I mean. I study him, the 2 straight back, the eyes that never fully rest, the way he keeps his hands loose, ready, even when he is standing still. I know men like him. I used to be one. You write it down, I say. That is how you fix it, not for the historians, for yourself, while it is still fresh, before your brain starts trying to sand off the edges so you can sleep. Tell the truth, the part you are proud of and the part you are not, especially the part you are not. I do not know if I can, he says. That is how I know you should, I say. He nods slowly. Will you write yours? He asks. I just did, I say, nodding at the case, except they forgot most of the important parts. He snorts. Maybe someone will get around to telling it right. Maybe, I say, or maybe in 100 years it will just be a paragraph in a textbook that makes some kid yawn between algebra homework and lunch. That is how it goes. Big things get smaller as they move away. He checks his watch. Soldiers always know the time. I should get back to my group, he says. Thank you, sir, for talking. And for, you know. He nods at the wire. I know, I say. He hesitates, then sticks out his hand. His grip is firm, warm, alive. For a moment I feel the calluses on his palm and imagine all the things that hand might hold in the years ahead. A rifle, a steering wheel, a wedding ring, a grandchild. Try to make it to 93, I say, just to see how weird it feels. He smiles for real this time. I will try, he says. Then he is gone, swallowed up by a group of uniforms listening to a tour guide talk about the Chosin Reservoir. The hall returns to its hum. Air conditioning, footsteps, murmurs, my own breathing. I turn back to the case. The wire sits there, mute. If you did not know what it had done, you would walk past it without a second look. That seems right to me. Most of the things that actually change the course of events look ordinary up close. A stone in a road wheel, a length of cable, a man deciding in one stupid, terrified moment to stand up instead of staying down. People call it ingenuity. They call it courage. They call it a symbol. I know better. I know it was panic and habit and luck. I know that if the posts had been rotten, or the wire an inch higher, or the Tiger Commander just a little more cautious, my name would be carved on a stone in a cemetery in France instead of printed on a card in Georgia. A museum guard clears his throat politely a few feet away. Closing time is coming. They will ask people to head toward the exit soon. Lights will go down. The wire will sit in the dark until morning, when another wave of visitors will stream past and point and read and move on. I take one last look. If my grandson ever comes here, he will stand where I am standing now and read that little card. He will see my name. He will see 8 inches of blackened wire. He will feel a brief flicker of pride, maybe. He will tell his friends, that was my granddad. He will not smell the burning rubber. He will not hear the clank of tracks on stone or the crack of the 88 or Rizzo whispering, I don't want to die here, into the sleeve of his jacket. He will not see the German officer laughing until he cries. He will not see the camp. He will not see the man reaching out his hand. He will not have to carry any of that. That is good. That is why men like me went in the first place. I turn away from the glass and start the slow walk toward the exit. My hip complains. My lungs complain. The world outside is quieter than the one inside my head, but not as much as I would like. I know that tonight, in whatever anonymous motel room I end up in on the drive back, I will wake up with my heart racing, fingers clawing at sheets that feel like damp earth, ears full of the sound of something huge rolling closer in the dark. The difference now is simple. The war is over. The wire is in a museum. The tanks are rust. The boys in the photographs are dust. The nightmares are just that. Bad dreams in the last reel of a long, uneven film. And one day soon, the film will stop. Until then, I do what I have always done. I put one foot in front of the other. I keep moving. I let the past ride on my shoulders like a tired child, too heavy to carry and too precious to drop. Behind me, in the bright hall, the wire sits in its case, waiting for the next pair of eyes to glance its way. In front of me, the automatic doors slide open with a soft hiss, and warm air spills in from outside. I step through, into the light, into whatever time is left, carrying everything and nothing at all.